you for joining us for today's Ipsos Foresight webinar, exploring what today's and tomorrow's parents want and how business leaders can support them. Throughout today's session, you will remain in listen-only mode. However, throughout the webinar, please submit your questions online using the Q&A feature. Time permitting, we'll answer questions at the end of today's session. However, if time runs short, then your question will be answered by email. I also want to encourage you to check out the handouts we've uploaded into the webinar control panel. A recording of today's webinar will also be directly emailed to you, so please keep an eye out for that. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Matt Carmichael, editor of What the Future. Matt, you have the floor.
Greetings and welcome to our parenthood webinar, which, yes, we did plan to run about a year after our Future of Love issue. So if that issue worked out really well for you, maybe you're ready for parenthood now. Just kidding, kinda. Anyway, I'm Matt Carmichael, editor of What the Future and your host today. I am a father of 3 teenagers, which means I have 41 years of parenting experience, because I think that should be counted in series, not in parallel. Today, you're going to hear from Ferrero's Kinder Chocolate about a very cool parenting segmentation they did. You'll hear from our friends at Pew about how parents today are different than parents from previous generations. You'll hear from a startup founder hoping to make parenting just a little easier and maybe more equal with AI. And author Jade Sasser about one of the things holding people back from becoming parents in the first place. But let's set the scene a little, shall we? So let's imagine it's 2034. Parenthood will be different in one critical way. Parents and kids won't be fighting over screens. Now, don't go getting too excited. Futurists love to talk about the post-screen era, where we don't carry around computers in our pockets and stare at screens all the time. But that doesn't mean we're going tech-free. We'll just replace screens with other tech. We're already seeing new screen-free artificial intelligence assistants and transparent LEDs come onto the market, so we're not that far off, perhaps. So let's just assume we'll still be fighting over something, because what are the odds that whatever replaces screens will be less attention-consuming and addictive? For now, time spent on screens is the #1 tension we have with our children, according to Ipsos data and my personal anecdata. It ranks higher than getting them to do chores, eat healthy, or do their homework. New York City has gone so far as to declare social media an environmental health toxin due to its impact on children. As we've discussed in Teen What the Future, those social media impacts require further study and are a little unknown at this point. But in our survey for this issue, parents overwhelmingly agree, 88%, that monitoring a child's screen time is an important role for themselves. Most try to limit their screen time, and most, 83%, think they're doing it pretty well. But they also think that kids spend too much time on screens and not enough time learning real social skills, and that it's overwhelming to raise a child in our current age of technology. Half worry that their kids are lonely. And that seems like a contradiction. Psychologists have a term for the human knack for thinking seemingly mutually exclusive things simultaneously. They call it cognitive polyphagia. And there's some other bits of funky looking data in the Future of Parenting study. For instance, 59% of parents say their kids love trying new foods, but another majority, 54%, say that their kids are picky eaters. And that could just reflect that people have more than one kid, and those kids are different. We'll talk later about hope that generative AI tools can finally be smart enough and flexible enough to learn the ins and outs of which of your kids eat peas and which will eat the frosting off a cupcake, but only if it's a vanilla one, and which playmates are gluten-free, and if mom is traveling for work, it means dad has to do pickup from lacrosse today. Now, to be sure, there's no shortage of things for parents to worry about. In an open-ended question, one parent said they worry about everything. 3 and 4 think there are more things to worry about than when they were kids. And Ipsos asked what their top concerns were, and the top 2 were mental health and bullying. And those were followed by hot button issues of sexualization of children and trafficking. Parenting is ever shifting and varies from culture to culture. Last year, a TikTok went viral showing that Nordic babies left in their strollers outside in the cold. Today, that's totally normal there, but it's not so much in the US. When my kids were born, my mom handed down a book she had relied on in raising my older sister and me. And it started out with some things that seemed odd to me. 2 weeks was the standard stay in the hospital after the birth. The dad wasn't allowed into the maternity ward for days. Their advice for how mom should cradle the baby in her arms in the passenger seat on the way home so as not to jostle its head against the door the whole ride, presumably while dropping ashes on it from her menthols. I'm exaggerating only slightly. This all sounds absurd, but it was the best-selling, normal advice. And part of foresight is trying to figure out the things we take for granted today that tomorrow will seem nuts, or what seems absurd today that maybe actually was a good idea. Was the cough syrup my pediatrician recommended that was part honey, part lemon juice, and part booze genius? Maybe. And it's expensive to have kids. The stroller I bought for my first kid cost more than my mom's first car, which of course she still had a receipt for. Most people understand that it costs more to raise a kid today than it did when they were kids. And there's so many more things you need to buy for one thing. Those costs are leading to inequalities, and inequalities including things in sports and more and school. And strikingly, people who might someday be a parent, 72% are worried that they won't be able to afford kids. And half say that it's important that it's mattered to the number of kids that they plan to have. These are things that can be solved with policy, and there are a number of proposals that would make it more affordable to have and raise kids on the table in the US. China has moved from a one-child policy to now promoting 3 kids as it faces population declines for the first time in ages. Today's parents rely on a wide network of sources, old and new, to learn how to navigate this world. There's no shortage of advice from friends and family and pastors and doctors and influencers and social media, books and podcasts. How do we figure out what to listen to? Even strangers passing by offer words of wisdom, like a fellow dad of twins who looked at my newborns in their car seats at a restaurant and shared this chestnut, which I think about more often than I should. He said, "It's a blessing. Everyone says it's a blessing. I haven't seen the blessing. I think it just is what it is." And today, this opens a lot of opportunities for brands and tech companies and content creators to do whatever they can to simplify the parental experience. Parents have so much going on today, and signs don't point to anything getting any easier. It comes at great personal, professional, and financial costs. Parents are always making trade-offs for their time and energy. But as one parent put it in an open-ended comment about the costs, "My child is worth it." Sadly, this was an online survey, so we can't discern the level of sarcasm in that response, but I'm sure it was purely on the level, right? Now that we've painted a nice data picture for you, I'm going to head off camera so we can dig into the heart of the issue, starting with the shifts that we see that are driving the changes in this space. So, starting with the shifts, we are looking at the rising cost of living. From the cost of housing to education, healthcare, and food, it seems nothing is safe from the increasing costs of daily life. Economic pressures from these realities can profoundly affect parenting. For those that do choose to have children, families might need to prioritize necessities, and parents working longer hours or multiple jobs diminishes the quality of family time. We're also looking at intergenerational living within the context of an aging population that can greatly influence parenting dynamics. It may provide built-in elder wisdom and support, potentially lightening the parenting load and bringing a range of styles and approaches to the household, which we'll talk about later. However, not all aging people will have the strength and abilities to chip in. And then there's the whole sandwich generation problem too. And yeah, tech and social media. While technology has been shaping parents and childhood for millennia, the recent digitization of our lives and the introduction of social media has added a great deal of complexity to family dynamics with few clear answers. So that's where we're at today, and a quick look at tomorrow. What do our experts have to say? We have a great panel we spoke with. Rachel Minkin is a research associate at the nonpartisan think tank Pew Research Center, a longtime partner with Ipsos. She has contributed to studies on subjects such as parenting, family life, family trends, gender identity, and the evolving workplace, all of which shape how we approach the task of raising future generations. She sees a shift in parenting methods compared to past generations as part of Pew's Parenting in America Today report. Pew's data shows that parents are trying to raise their kids with similar values to how they were raised, but how they get there differs, especially in terms of discipline and how they view love and relationships. But one finding stood out to her. She said, thinking about all the things that parents could worry about for their children, seeing that 40% are extremely or very worried their children will struggle with anxiety or depression is a key finding. Here's what she told Kate MacArthur when they chatted.
There aren't many consistent differences between parents who are married or living with a partner and those who are not married or not living with a partner. But we do see a few areas, and we've been talking about parenting styles. So in terms of parenting styles, parents who are married or living with a partner are more likely than those who aren't to say they stick to their guns too much, but they're equally likely to say they give in too quickly, the other side of it. And parents who are married or partnered are more likely to say they push their children too hard compared with parents who aren't married or partnered. And thinking about those aspirations and goals they have for their children when they reach adulthood. So both married and cohabiting parents and parents who aren't married or cohabiting prioritize that financial independence and career satisfaction for their children. So see those as very important, more so than the other things we asked about. But those who are married or cohabiting are more likely than those who aren't to say it's extremely or very important that their children get married when they're older.
We see that in our Ipsos data in the parenting survey as well, that for all their differences, parents in the US share common hopes and fears about their kids' futures, as revealed by a recent Ipsos ethnography study of parents of school-age children. Parents' wishes and worries don't just shape how they spend their time and money, but how they view brands and institutions, writes Sheena Singh, an Ipsos anthropologist. She said that means that businesses and policymakers alike should be paying close attention. In Ipsos' study, most parents said that their children's happiness was the most important thing, but that optimism is tempered by age-old anxieties around racism and the pressures of a competitive world from the classroom to the workforce. To address these problems and meet these needs, businesses should go beyond the data and listen to what parents have to say in their own words. It's often real stories that shape the most powerful and effective policies and marketing. At the intersection of these things is a fascinating segment done by chocolatier Ferrero. As we emerged from the pandemic, the parenting landscape was complicated to say the least, and it was a challenging time to bring a global brand to a new market, like the US. So Ferrero's Kinder Chocolate brand worked with Ipsos on a segmentation to understand today's parents, and what they learned portends an increasingly complicated landscape of parenting in the future. Through the segmentation, Ferrero found contrasts with how they thought about parents previously and within other markets. Catherine Bertrac said, "We used to have 3 types of parents: traditional authoritarian parents, permissible parents, and some parents that were in between. But through the study, they discovered that there were more complex attitudes and behaviors in parenting, and that the group of authoritarian parents is actually relatively small now." And she said that informs their strategy for marketing, which is increased importance of communication between parents and kids, and the transversal groups, and the importance of having fun together. Evoking a sense of nostalgia is important too. Here's what she told me when we chatted.
When in a couple, you have not the same style of parenting, because not everybody is the same. You could have, because of your origin, because of your gender, because of your completely different approach. So how they combine this kind of different style and different way of being a parent. And this is not easy. We have seen a family is not one and has one style and this style is forever. No, now first, the style may change according to the age of the kids, but also inside the family, it may as well have different way of seeing how to raise kids and bond with them. There are some interesting aspects that are linked to the age of the parents, to the origin of the parents, and how they're evolving in the societies. Interesting matter that will be evolving more and on which we need really to keep track to be able to address the right strategy when it comes to market some product, whatever it is, or just to be extremely true and authentic with what parents need. This is very important.
Americans are often told by businesses and brands that dated gender roles are firmly in the past, but when it comes to raising a family, not all parents feel that same support. Ipsos data indicates that many American parents think businesses have further to go, writes Melissa Dunn, an Ipsos senior data journalist. Even as broader views on gender evolve in the workplace, outdated prejudices can persist. Nearly 2 in 5 Americans agree that having childcare responsibilities come up during the working day is more likely to damage the career of a woman, while almost a quarter of American men say that a man who stays home to look after his children is less of a man. That means that brands and businesses looking to promote ESG to buttress their reputations should start by looking inward and implement gender-neutral policies that reflect and encourage equal opportunities, like paternal and caregiver leave. In a social age, employees are increasingly visible and vocal as brand ambassadors, so businesses should ensure that their workers' experience match their brand's public-facing values. As I said earlier, making parents' lives easier is a great way to think about innovation in this space. The role of parents reads a bit like an org chart or the US cabinet. Think logistics and finance, procurement, education, entertainment, and more logistics. It's ripe for simplification. More often than not, moms bear more of that burden. Avni Patel Thompson is a parent to 9 and 11-year-old daughters. She's leading a company backed by OpenAI and Y Combinator called Milo, which aims to be your one-stop AI assistant and co-pilot for managing your parenting life. She hopes it can ease the invisible load moms bear and make it easier for families to coordinate. She says that when compared to general adulting, parenting looks more like specialized knowledge akin to medicine or architecture or law. We need to think about the invisible dependencies. Every task has a million subtasks and supertasks. And because it's hard to transfer some of that knowledge between parents at the moment, moms tend to take on more of that cognitive load. It's hard to help out with the grocery shopping and buy the bananas if you haven't also been the one who did the meal plan or knows which nights all the kids have sports. And that can be frustrating for the moms, but also for the dads who want to help even things out. She's hoping AI can help ease that burden, especially for the moms, but also in a way that lets dads find more equal footing. Here's what she told me when we chatted.
On the meal standpoint, I carry the greatest weight when I'm like, what is going on next week, such that I have to figure out what is the dinners for next week, then what are the lunches, and then if you can help me figure out what the meals are, then what's the grocery list that needs to come out of it. When we're thinking about the invisible load, I'm very focused on everything upstream of that person purchasing that banana, right? And there's lots of different ways to purchase that banana. You could do Instacart, you could send someone to the store, but there aren't nearly enough ways to help on the upstream part of actually thinking through all of those other pieces. Understanding that families are more collaborative than ever before. And I'm not just talking about maybe a person and their partner, right? Like families today look like all manners of types of things. And so if you were to believe that you have more people working to collaborate on a family, more information, and then more options than ever on like the outsourcing or the apps and services and everything, then what we're singularly focused on is how do you create a one place that everyone can access that isn't my brain, my inbox? And then how do you have that someone be constantly looking for all of that stuff? We've found that it's generally speaking women's brains that are being used as the computers to run all of these things, to hold in the information, remind all the people, and then anticipate all this stuff. And there's actually, if it's a computer that we need, then we can go build that with the logic and the database and all of that kind of stuff. And it's something that everyone can equally access. There's these same fights that go over, and I'm not surprised anymore because we have no other chance but for that frustration to come out because we don't have good tools for collaboration, right? I don't have a good way to tell my husband that, oh, what's the meal plan for next week or all these types of things, because I hold it in my head. And then if he wants to help on groceries, there's no other place for this conversation to end up other than one of frustration, because if you want to do grocery shopping, then you have to go take on the rest of the things.
Having kids doesn't just change parents' social lives and sleep patterns. It changes how they view the world, and Ipsos research suggests that makes them more likely to act on environmental issues, writes Alicia Lever, an account manager at Ipsos. She said that when it comes to spending, many consumers fail to act on their stated beliefs, what Ipsos calls a say-do gap. But a recent Ipsos survey of affluent Americans, those with household incomes of $125,000 or more, suggests that parents are more likely to close that gap and spend in line with their environmental priorities. Compared with non-parents, affluent parents were more likely to consider a hybrid car, purchase locally grown food, or seek out eco-friendly products. And regardless of whether they have kids or a high salary, more Americans than ever are concerned about the planet. But brands should understand that these values have an outsized impact on affluent parents, and that their purchase influences others in the communities. So far we've talked a lot about stressors for parents: money, time, gender roles, screens, how you feed your kids, how you afford them. We've also talked about how brands communicate around and are even trying to solve for some of those pressures. But one pressure is even more existential. Climate is one worry that is leading people to delay or even avoid becoming parents at all, says Jade Sasser, an associate professor of gender and sexuality studies at the University of California, Riverside. She hosts a podcast on the issue and has a forthcoming book dropping next month called Climate Anxiety and the Kid Question: Deciding Whether to Have Children in an Uncertain Future. Here's how it's shaping people's family planning decisions today and for tomorrow. She says a lot of factors go into the decision to have kids. However, when it comes to climate change, more young people, especially in Generation Z, are saying, I don't know if I can bring children into this climate disaster. And those who are choosing to have a child while navigating those feelings are increasingly navigating living with and adapting to climate change. And not just in terms of Midwest ski resorts not having snow anymore. It's a lot. And there are more and more climate-aware therapists who can help. But for those therapists to be effective, people have to realize that there's a problem and that they're not alone in feeling that way. Here's what she told our managing editor, Kate MacArthur.
A lot of people simply aren't talking about climate anxiety. Or if they are, they might only be talking to one or two people. They might not be aware that this is quite a widespread concern. Bringing the issue out of the shadows, getting the necessary support by decreasing stigma and having the conversation are going to be important. We need to hear more from people who are parents and who have become parents while navigating climate anxiety. Becoming a parent is not something that you do after you have solved all of your climate anxiety issues and have now become confident that you can parent without your child ever experiencing climate change. That's not the case at all. In fact, I think that what is more likely to make people feel comfortable about this set of issues is to understand that people are navigating climate anxiety and becoming parents all the time. And there are increasingly resources to help people do that navigating.
So one of the ways we like to think about the future is to think about the tensions that are driving some of that. And the nice thing about doing foresight as a market researcher is these are things we can measure today and things that we'll be able to measure again tomorrow and see how those shifts change. So we've started to set these tensions up in a way that we can create a standard 2x2 grid and think about the different futures that exist in each of those quadrants. We're going to go through two of them today. So let's talk about the future in terms of two of these stressors, climate and affordability. Today, we think it's going to be harder to afford kids and that today's children, and let's face it, today's adults, will face climate change challenges in the future. In that world, we'll have a hard time adapting resiliently to the worsening climate, which now feels impossible to forestall. Climate will accelerate inequality, and will parents be able to afford to help their kids adapt with more air conditioning and new technological safety clothing, or even costly relocation to more habitable climates? And think about what this means for our already aging population if we just quit having kids. Granted, the older population is more vulnerable and living in more vulnerable places, so maybe the age pyramids will look different on both ends. That's a lot of cheeriness for one quadrant. But what if we curb climate change impacts somehow? In this future, parents can afford to equip themselves and their kids to deal with the ravages of climate. There's more spending in categories like indoor entertainment and apparel, gone are road trips, RIP national parks, and water slide gateways, RIP water, and in virtual tours and indoor sports are the new thing we're thinking about. With climate effects already visible, the affordability aspect makes this not the worst possible future. Speaking of the future, we're leaving for our kids. We are on the cusp of what is said to be the largest generational transfer of wealth ever, like in the trillions. But we know it won't be evenly distributed, and we also know that not everyone will want to leave a nest egg for their kids or be able to. Some want to enjoy their wealth. Some know they won't have much left over when the time comes. And for now, we want to spend time with our kids today, but we lean toward, but are less sure we want to leave them wealth when we're gone. So at the intersection of some traditional and hopeful opinions is where we find ourselves today. But with many Americans retiring with no savings at all, this will be a hard future for many to attain, no matter how much we want it. We're not that far away from a majority saying their kids should make their own way. So what would that future look like? Where parents spend time with their kids, but it's not just backyard catch or family movie night. They're teaching kids how to be self-sufficient, because that's what we're going to need to do. Kids learn the basics like cooking, but those with means are also learning financial planning and early job skills. Think about all those middle school coding and robotics streams. So what jobs will brands have to do in the future? We've heard all of the stressors. So clearly a job for brands in the future is helping people take care of their families in their presents and their futures. And we think about this in the terms of the traditional jobs to be done framework, but spinning that forward towards future jobs to be done. So in a world where our population is rapidly aging, the roles of family members have shifted as more households are multi-generational ones. Parents are working more than ever with grandparents, taking on more of a daily caregiver role for their grandkids. Of course, parents don't want to be left out of rearing our most precious resource, our children. So potential future jobs to be done include helping me be fully present at the key daily and life moments for my kids, helping me seamlessly shift between work mode, parent mode, and elder caregiving mode. Prevent me from missing out on anything important, work promotions, kids, milestones, unexpected curveballs, etc. And we can then imagine a world where adults of working ages are needed to power our economy and pay for increasingly unaffordable daycare and elder care. In this world, there are more multi-generational households where everyone has a key role to play. And that brings us towards the end of our webinar. But I want to close with a couple thoughts and a little teaser for next month. First is that why do we do this? Why does Ipsos produce What the Future? Why do we spend this time, and why do you join us to think about this time? And the answer is that the more time we spend thinking about the future, whether that's by doing a traditional trends or foresight engagement, or even just coming to a webinar like this over your lunch, it's that when we think about the world that's going to exist in 3 to 5 to 10 years, and think about the world our customers will be living in and the kind of user experience we'll need, the kind of innovation we'll need to put in the pipeline today to get us to that future tomorrow. The more we do this, the more we spend time thinking about possible tomorrows, the better questions we ask and the better research we'll do today. So thank you so much for joining. Next month, we are coming back to one of our most popular topics ever with the future of wellness. And that issue set, it is rolling off the presses soon, and you will have that in your inbox if you subscribe to our free monthly newsletter about What the Future, which you can do at ipsos.com. You can get all of our past issues at future.ipsos.com. And I thank you so much for taking some time and joining me today. I look forward to seeing you all again in the future.